We now come to the time in our program where our own KBCS Mysterious Radio theater troupe shares with us their dramatic talents. You as the studio audience are encouraged to participate. Remember to watch for the prompts that will tell you what to do. You may remember that our last episode was the melodramatic comedy Way, Way Down East. Tonight the troupe is changing pace with Sherlock Holmes Mystery. It is a shocking thriller, The Case of the Missing Pearls, and features so many twists and turns. Ladies and gentlemen, you had better hold on to your seats. Our story begins in the living room of the country estate of Buxton and Penelope English. The housekeeper, Mrs. Slipcover, is inquiring after instructions on the day's luncheon. Let's listen in.
And how many will there be for lunch, Mrs. English?
More than we originally expected, Mrs. Slipcover. Let me see. Now there will, of course, be Mr. Anguish and myself. You are going to have lunch, are you not, Buxton?
Indeed I am, Penelope, my dear.
And then there will be Hermione and Monty Dare.
Oh, and don't they make a lovely couple?
Yes, and Miss Paddlecart.
Isn't she going home soon?
Well, why, Mrs. Slipcover, you're not anxious to get rid of Miss Paddlecart, are you? She's an old school friend of Hermione's.
Oh, no, sir, I'm not trying to get rid of her.
And then, of course, as I expect they'll be arriving before lunchtime, we should expect Dr. John Hoopson and Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, ma'am, I can hardly wait to get a look at him. Just think of having a great detective like Mr. Sherlock Holmes right in the same house. Slipcover and I spent half the night talking about it.
Ah, Mrs. Slipcover, did your husband walk again in his sleep last night?
No, sir. After Slipcover retired about 11, and after our chat about Mr. Sherlock Holmes, he never stirred a muscle.
Ah, good. I've been worried about him. Sleepwalking butlers aren't exactly my particular cup of tea.
And especially since there have been so many strange happenings here for the past 2 weeks. In any event, Mrs. Slipcover, there will be 7 for lunch, as far as I can tell.
Very good, ma'am. Will a bit of consomme, a nice piece of sole, and a gooseberry tart be all right?
Ah, splendid, Mrs. Slipcover. I'm very fond of gooseberry tart.
Very good, sir. I'll be about my business then.
Oh, Buxton, do you really think Mr. Holmes will be able to solve the mystery of my missing pearls?
If he can't, my dear, I don't know who can. The man is an uncanny intuition.
The pearls meant so much to me. You remember, Buxton, you gave them to me on our 4th anniversary.
Ah, of course, my dear.
And I've always been so careful of them. In fact, when I'm not wearing them, I unstring each one and hide them in a different place. And yet, just last week, one of them was stolen from the drawer of the desk in our room.
And this week, one of them was taken from the medicine cabinet.
And the night before last, we heard those horrible cries in the night that seemed They seemed to come from outside somewhere.
And not to forget the mysterious fire in the South Barn last week. And Matilda.
Matilda?
The cow. She has the croup, you know.
Oh, Buxton, what does this all mean? There's something evil loose around us. I'm frightened, Buxton, frightened.
Mr. English rises and walks over to Mrs. English and pats her hand in comfort.
Oh, there, my dear. Be of good cheer. Sherlock Holmes will be here soon, and I know he will throw light on the dark happenings that have so terrified you.
Oh, Buxton, I hope you're right, and that your confidence in Mr. Holmes will be justified.
Oh, it will, my dear. Never fear. Hark! Here comes our dear daughter and the handsome Monty Dare.
Hello, Mother. Hello, Father. We've had the loveliest walk. The spring air is like wine today, and all the flowers are beginning to bud.
Yet nothing that spring has to offer is so lovely as your fair daughter, Mr. and Mrs. English.
Monty.
It's true, Hermione. You are the fairest flower of the season.
I'm so excited today at the prospect of seeing the great Sherlock Holmes in person.
I want you to know, Mrs. Anguish, how deeply sorry I am about the loss of your pearls. It was a dastardly deed, and I promise to do all in my poor power to expose the perpetrator of so foul a crime.
Oh, Monty, how wonderful you are.
Why, thank you, my boy, for those kind sentiments. My wife and I are most grateful.
When I was awakened last night by those dreadful, inhuman cries, I trembled like a small child in the midst of a terrible nightmare. Oh, what could be happening to our once so happy home? What monstrous creature is afoot?
At this, Alice Paddlecart enters the living room. She is a pretty girl of Hermione's age and is in fact her school chum. She rushes to Hermione and takes both of her hands.
Honey, darling, you seem upset. What is it?
It is the dreadful happenings of the past 2 weeks that have upset me, Alice.
All will be well. Do you remember how at school you sometimes became frightened by
The little things. And you always comforted me, Alice.
And so I shall now. Don't worry. The great Mr. Holmes will soon be here.
Slipcover, the butler, a thin, solemn-looking man, enters.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Hoops.
Show them in at once, Slipcover.
Very good, sir.
At last, the great Sherlock Holmes.
This is the moment we all have been waiting for.
Slipcover returns with the great Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Oopson. Mr. Holmes is carrying a violin case under his arm.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. John Hoopson.
This is a great pleasure, Mr. Holmes. I'm Boston Anguish. And how do you do, Dr. Oopson?
Very well. Thank you for asking.
Holmes lays his violin case down, takes out a magnifying glass from his pocket, and on all four begins to scrutinize the floor.
Oh, how wonderful. Mr. Holmes wastes no time.
Please, miss, we must have silence. Holmes is concentrating as only he can.
All stare, fascinated, as Holmes on hands and knees does his detecting. Mrs. Slipcover enters.
What a wonderful sight.
Shh! Henrietta, Mr. Holmes is concentrating.
As only he can.
Aha!
Found something, my dear fellow?
Possibly, whoopsie, possibly. Ah, yes, I recognize the ash, of course. It somewhat resembles Latvia. And yes, there are differences. Someone in the house has been smoking Italian cheroots. I have, as you perhaps know, written a monograph on the characteristics of tobacco ash.
Holmes goes to Mrs. Slipcover.
Will you hold out your right hand, please? Ah, yes, the nicotine stain between thumb and forefinger. You, madame, are the cheroot smoker.
Why, Mrs. Slipcover, I never knew you used tobacco.
Well, ma'am, I've been trying to break myself of the filthy habit. I first became addicted to Italian cheroots when I was in the service of the Countess Ravioli in Italy. She always smoked one before bedtime and insisted each night that I join her.
I know, sir, that you have spent some time in India.
Good heavens, you're uncanny, Mr. Holmes. How could you have possibly guessed? I was in the diplomatic service there for 25 years.
Elementary, my dear Anguish, elementary. I note that your bookcase is filled with tomes concerning India. I note, too, that on the wall of your reception room where I came in, there was a print by the Hindu artist, Garamara Swinali. According to the inscription on the print, he presented it to you.
Remarkable.
How thrilling.
You have keen perception, sir.
None keener. But now, let us to the business that has brought me here. This circumstance of the missing pearls must be most distressing to you. I know, of course, about their sentimental value. An anniversary present, were they not?
Yes.
It would appear from what you have told me that some member of the household must be the guilty one.
Oh, my dear Holmes, I think not. The servants have been with us for years, and the house guests are above reproach.
I should appreciate being introduced to your house guest.
Of course, this is Alice Patricot, an old school friend of my daughter, Hermione.
A pleasure, Miss Paddlecott. I observe you are a great lover of flowers and that you are partial to lemonade.
How in the world did you know?
There's not much he doesn't know, I can tell you.
Elementary, my dear Miss Paddlecott. Really elementary. There is a bit of lemon peel on your lower lip, and on your hands there is a telltale stain that is made only from my observation by the type of rose that is known as the Supreme. Rosietus suprematis, to give it its Latin term.
He's a genius, that's what he is.
And this is Monty Dare, my daughter Hermione's fiancé.
And what can you tell about me, Mr. Holmes?
You ride a bicycle, you have recently taken a trip by train, and your sciatica is improving.
But how?
Too simple, really, my dear Dare, to merit detailed explanation. There's a sort of ring around your trouser cuffs. A ring I believe is called a bicycle clip. The stub of a railway ticket protrudes from your upper pocket, and you walk with a slight limp. Occasionally pressing your right hand to your hip, a sure sign that you have fairly recently been plagued by sciatica or lumbago.
It's all so easy when you explain it, Mr. Holmes.
Exactly. But none of us has trained himself to observe so minutely as my friend Holmes.
Mr. Dare and Miss Paddlecott are your only house guests at present, Mr. Anguish?
Ah, yes. They have been here for several weeks.
Indeed. And how long have Mr. and Mrs. Slipcover been in your service?
10 years, sir, come Christmas.
They are good and faithful servants.
And yet of late, Slipcover has been walking in his sleep.
Ah, has he?
Mr. Holmes begins inspecting Mr. Slipcover's eyes through his magnifying glass.
Ah, most interesting. A slight dilation of the iris, although the retina appears almost normal. Tell me, my good man, is sleepwalking common with you, or is it a recent development?
Most recent, Mr. Holmes. Until last week, I never sleepwalked in my life.
Interesting, most interesting. As the French say, makes one furiously to think. And now, madame, what of the mysterious cries that have been heard in the night?
Oh, Mr. Holmes, they were inhuman, like an animal in distress.
Indeed, and what of the South Barn? It was burned last week, was it not?
To a cinder.
You believe that someone set the fire?
Well, I think it highly possible, Mr. Holmes. And we must not forget Matilda.
Matilda.
The cow, she has the croup.
Most interesting. You note, Whoopson, my dear fellow, how the plot thickens. The game is afoot, and we must keep our wits about us.
You're right, my dear Holmes.
I think, Mr. and Mrs. English, that I can promise you a solution to the strange happenings within 24 hours.
He's a living miracle, that's what he is.
Thank you, madame. You are most kind and most correct.
I hope, Mr. Holmes, that you succeed. Dear Hermione has been a bundle of nerves since these dreadful things began to happen.
Hermione has always been delicate and fragile.
But you and I, Alice, will do all we can to protect her from further terrors.
Indeed. Most interesting. And now, with your permission, I shall confine myself to a few moments on my violin. I find that music helps me to concentrate.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, feel at liberty to do whatever you wish.
Thank you, my dear fellow.
Capital, my dear Holmes, capital. I recognize your favorite tune, Clementi's Night in a Turkish Bath.
The developments of the first act have been truly puzzling. First, the disappearance of Mrs. Anguish's beloved pearls, the inhuman cries in the night, followed by the burning of the barn and the baffling development of a croupy cow. Mr. Sherlock Holmes has his work cut out for him. Let us proceed with our story and see if Holmes lives up to his reputation. We resume around midnight on the same day. Holmes and Dr. Hoopson are the only occupants of the living room. Holmes is lying on the divan, hands locked behind his head, the picture of solid comfort. Dr. Hoopson, who appears somewhat nervous, is pacing the floor.
My dear Whoopson, there really is no need for your eternal pacing up and down. Serenity, my dear fellow, is what is needed.
I can't help feeling, my dear Holmes, that something of terrible consequence may happen here tonight.
Exactly! That is why you and I are passing the midnight hours in this room when everyone in the household thinks we are snugly in bed. Does this not remind you, my dear Whoopson, of the midnight vigil when we were pursuing the case of the speckled canary?
It does indeed. I was nearly killed that night. On damp days, the knee through which the pellets pass still gives me difficulty.
Hazards of our occupation, my dear Whoopson. Hazards of our occupation. But quiet. I hear footsteps. A man's, I believe.
Slipcover, the butler enters. His eyes are partially closed, and he walks with his hands stretched before him. Obviously, he is walking in his sleep.
Aha! Our old friend Slipcover! I suspected he might appear on the scene.
Is he the culprit?
Not at all! Whoopsie! He's a man more syndicate than something.
Holmes goes to Slipcover and gently takes him by the shoulders.
Note now, Whoopsie, the great benefits I have derived from my study of hypnotism with the late and great Professor Longnose.
You mean that Slipcover is a victim of hypnosis?
Indubitably! When I examined his eyes this afternoon, I noted the telltale signs.
You're amazing, my dear Holmes.
Of course I am! I will wave my fingers before his face. Clap twice. And with the snap of the fingers. Aha!
Henrietta?
Not your wife, my dear fellow. I am Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yes. It is Mr. Holmes. What am I doing here?
You are a victim of a dastardly plot, Slipcover. But those who are trying to implicate you with their heinous crime now have to reckon with the brain of Sherlock Holmes.
Hear, hear.
Plots? But I don't understand.
You win, my man, you win. But now, for the good of all, you had best return to your room. Say nothing about our little meeting, and do not worry about sleepwalking. You will never walk in your sleep again.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes, thank you. I was becoming a mere shell of my former self. Sleepwalking is such a dangerous business. Who knows? I might have killed myself on one of these expeditions.
Exactly.
Well, sir, I'll follow your advice and go to my room. I think, sir, I'm getting to know who has done this.
Say no more, Slipcover, say no more. I am sure you do know. It may interest you to hear that I knew the complete story less than, 30 minutes after I arrived this afternoon.
You're a remarkable man, Mr. Holmes.
I agree with you.
Well, thank you, and good night.
Whoops, everything is progressing just as I had hoped.
I must confess, my dear Holmes, that I'm still very much in the dark.
And yet the entire solution is before your very nose. Whoopsin, you disappoint me. Put that agile mind of yours to work.
Mr. Holmes returns to the divan and sits.
You are expecting more visitors?
Just as I had expected.
Great heavens, Holmes. Those cries are enough to chill even the least susceptible spine.
Oh, well, unlike yours, my spine is immune, my dear. Whoopsie.
But hadn't we better investigate?
No need, all is well, I assure you. Our visitors will arrive soon, my dear. Whoopsie. I must ask you to hide behind that chair. I shall place myself behind this divan. Make no noise, Whoopsie, and reveal yourself only when I whistle twice.
If you say so, Holmes, but I'm only muddle.
So is everyone. Well, except for me, of course. My dear. Whoopsie.
Beautifully done, was it not, Alice? I uttered those cries under Hermione's window. She'll be shaking with fright.
Oh, Monty, you're so clever.
And you're not half bad yourself. You got the pearl?
Yes. Miss Anguish hid it in this one in a bottle of perfume in her bureau.
Huh, that old girl doesn't have much imagination, does she?
She's almost as dumb as Hermione.
Just think, Alice, if we can pilfer only 2 more of those pearls, we can sell them for a small fortune to a good friend of mine in London, Squealy Gore. It's a well-known fence. And then, you and I can go off together to a new life.
And to love.
And yes, above all, to love. And I'll be free of the weak and simpering Hermione. Why, I would have married her if she was the last girl in the world. But her mother's pearls will certainly be useful.
A cordial good evening to you, Miss Paddlecott, and to you, Mr. Boncy Dare.
Curses! Discovered!
Oh, we are lost!
You're a fine pair of rascals, I must say.
Your conniving has been brought to light, Dare. It may interest you to know that I knew the truth about your plotting less than 15 minutes after I arrived today.
In a pig's eye, you did.
You doubt my word, do you?
You bet I do.
Very well, my man, then listen. Are you not the son of Danbury Dare?
What if I am?
Only this. It is well known that Danbury Dare has long been a student of hypnotism. In fact, he was introduced to its mysteries, as I was, by Professor Longnose.
And what does that prove?
It struck me as very likely that your father would initiate you into the fundamentals of hypnotism. Then when I examined Slipcover's eyes today, it was obvious he had been hypnotized. Under your hypnosis, he was forced by you to walk in his sleep. In order, I am sure. The suspicion of the thefts, the nightly noises, and the barn burning might fall to him.
Don't forget Matilda,
Matilda.
the creepy cow.
Oh yes, how could I forget?
We heard voices here and wondered what was happening.
Holmes has uncovered the culprit, sir.
Exactly. Miss Paddlecott and Mr. Dare have been engaged in nefarious scheme to rob you of your pearls, madame, and to sell them. Then with their ill-gotten gains, they were going together to South America. I deduced such within 10 minutes of arriving today.
Why, you cad, Dare. You unspeakable cad.
Easy, Grandpa. Nobody's proved anything yet.
Indeed. Whoopson, will you fetch Slipcover at once?
My pleasure, Holmes.
I first became aware of the fact that Mr. Dare and Miss Paddlecott were more than mere acquaintances this afternoon when he placed his hand on her shoulder. Dare. The time for retribution is upon you.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, we owe you a great deal.
Naturally, madame, naturally. You will receive a bill for my fee in the morning mail. I detest taking money for my services, but one must live.
Of course.
Ah, Slipcover, will you tell your story so that Mr. Dare will be revealed for the base fellow he is?
Indeed I will, sir, and glad I am to do it. Since Mr. Dare has been here, he has taken upon himself to visit me often in the kitchen. We talked a great deal, and I noticed he always looked me straight in the eyes. I thought nothing of it at first, but now I know, thanks to Mr. Holmes, that he was hypnotizing me.
Splendid, splendid. And now, Dare, do you not have an uncle? Your father's brother, I believe, Hubert Dare?
What if I do?
Nothing, except that he is a confirmed pyromaniac.
Oh, goodness gracious. And what's that?
A pyromaniac, Mrs. Slipcover, is someone who gets great joy out of setting fires.
How horrible.
Exactly. Now let me quote. I have, of course, a photographic memory. So here it goes from a book by Dr. Pickleman Brine. Of all obsessions, pyromania is most likely to be inherited. It is known to pass particularly from uncle to nephew. And there are many striking examples to illustrate this fact. End of quotation. Do I make myself clear?
Why, dash it, Holmes. You mean that young Dare here has inherited pyromania from his uncle, and that is why he burned the barn, thus leaving poor Matilda without nightly cover, giving her the croup.
How well you put these things, Wilson. Yes, that is exactly the case. I suspect that our poor friend Slipcover, because of his sleepwalking, was meant to take the blame for that too.
Oh, Monty, say it isn't true.
I'm afraid, miss, he can say nothing of the kind.
And Alice, I trusted you so, and look what you've done.
You're a Jezebel, that's what you are.
Oh, and a thief as well.
You won't get me, I can tell you.
Dare makes a dash to the door. Mr. Holmes, with the agility of a panther, is after him at once. He catches Dare just as he gets to the door and with the flat of his hand strikes Dare once on the shoulder and once on the neck. Monty falls to the floor howling with pain.
Oh, that really hurt!
I am indebted to my old and valued Japanese friend, Hagen Tsukiyama, for teaching me the ancient art of jujitsu. It has served me well on many occasions.
Is there anything men can't do?
Nothing, madame, nothing. And now, Dare, and you, Miss Babicott, may step outside. I took the liberty of informing my friend Inspector Bulge of the Scotland Yard that I would have 2 guests for him tonight. He awaits you out there. Whoopsie, will you escort this desperate duo to the waiting arms of Inspector Bulge?
A pleasure, my dear Holmes.
Why, Mr. Holmes, you are a genius.
You were right.
I've never seen anything like it.
We are, of course, grateful to you, Mr. Holmes, but I've lost a fiancé and been in complete disillusion in the bargain.
Have no qualms, my dear Miss Anguish. I think of everything. Have you ever heard of Handsome Hogan?
You mean the young and brilliant Scotland Yard detective who's really the son of an Irish peer, Sir Haphazard Hogan?
None other than he.
Oh!
He has told me many times that he's looking for a delicate, fragile, and beautiful girl. Object matrimony. I took the liberty, if you will, pardon me, of asking you here tonight. And here, if my eyes do not mistake me, is Handsome Hogan with Dr. Whoopson.
I've safely delivered the 2 culprits to Inspector Bulge's waiting arms, Holmes.
Splendid.
And you are Hermione?
And you are Handsome Hogan.
Forgive me for the suggestion. I know a slave would you strode me the garden.
Oh. Bother the time of night. I'd love to.
Ah, true love. Isn't that a beautiful sight?
Ah, yes, young love. Young love. Just kidding. Okay. And now that all difficulties are cleared, I shall seek relaxation in the solace of my violin. You are all welcome to stay.
It's lovely and all that, Mr. Holmes, but I think I'd like a cup of tea.
Oh, I'm a great music lover, Holmes, and I'm glad you invited me, but I could do with a spot of tea myself.
I'd dearly love to stay, but my sleepwalking activities have tired me. I think I'd best retire.
Slipcover may need me.
Too bad they couldn't stay, Holmes. You're in unusually good form tonight.
Ah, yes. Yes, I am. Whoopsin. Music hath charms.